All right, so good morning, everybody. This is week 2. Welcome to week 2. Hopefully everybody has had a chance to get some rest and relaxation over the weekend. Um, if you're anything like me, you're probably very busy catching up on everything. So I do have, I have had some people ask some questions in emails. Again, if you could just either attend the Zoom sessions or post in the general discussion. A lot of you are posted in the general discussion, which is super helpful. So thank you for that. So far, I think everything seems to be going pretty well on my end anyway. It doesn't seem like there's any major fires or anything major that's coming up. So I do appreciate all of your cooperation in making this successful so far. I think there were some questions about the assignment, the timeliness, and that sort of thing. I'll answer all those here at the end when we get to the end of what I want to present today. But yeah, for the most part, I think things are moving pretty well. And it's going to take some time, as you know, to get into the groove of things. I'm pretty consistent with my assignments and quizzes. Quizzes are looking great, by the way. So anyway, keep up the good work. Last time that we met, we talked about how psychology exists as a science and some of the research methods that go into it, how we develop a research question, and that evolves into a hypothesis, which we then we start testing the hypothesis through available research. And if there's no available research, or if we want to further the study, we can certainly do that with experimentation or observations or surveys or whatever, right? And you're all going to get a chance to do that with our group project. So our group project, you're going to have your first group project, quote unquote. It's really more individual, but for the end of this week, by Sunday midnight, what I'd like for all of you to do is to go ahead and answer that evaluation, that student evaluation in assessments. And you're not going to have to evaluate each other just yet, because we're not going to be I'm not going to be putting you into groups just yet. So once I get those evaluations, I'll have a better understanding of whether or not you have your group picked out, or if you're okay just answering those questions and let me put you into a group that I think is going to best be suited for you. And hopefully we won't have too many people that opt out of it, because it is a lot of fun. But through the group project, you have your choice. You can either do a major literary review, which is picking and pulling all sorts of available data from peer-reviewed articles or other research projects, and combining them, developing your own hypothesis as to what you expect to see from all this available data, and then combining that and substantiating that with what's available, and then coming up with a conclusion at the end. So roughly I think it's about 8 to 12 pages, somewhere in there. And again, with 4 or 5 of you in each group, this is going to be a pretty easy assignment. The other cool thing that I'm happy to do is let you run observations or experiments. Now, I'm going to kind of just preempt that with saying that you can do experimentation as long as you're not really involving human subjects that you could be potentially harming, especially children. Like if don't be doing anything rash, like trying to think of examples. But you read the ethics, so anything that would potentially cause long-term effects to an individual or children or anything like that, that is completely off the table. So what I'm really looking more towards is more like observation. So if you can, for example, if you sit at a stop sign and you're waiting for people, observing people going through that stop sign, and just marking down, are they under the age of 30? Do they look like they're under the age of 30? Do they look like they're middle-aged? Do they look like they're elderly? And seeing how many people come to a full stop, for example. That's an observation, and that's completely harmless because you're not really doing anything. Now, if you put a stop sign in the middle of a highway to see how many people are stopping, that's a big no-no, right? Because now we have safety concerns. So those are just examples. That's just an example of things that you can do. The less influence you have on people, the better. And if you have any questions, there's under the general discussion post, there's a forum for research topics. So just go ahead and put whatever your question is for the research topics. And when you get in your groups, we'll talk more about that. So anyway, the purpose of this week is just to figure out exactly what groups we're going to be putting you in. So just fill out that questionnaire within assessments, get that to me by Sunday. And then by the following week, I'll have you placed into your groups. Okay. All right. Any questions on that so far on the groups?
So this week we're just filling out that evaluation to see where we're going to be in, where we're at, like with this group project, and then the following week we'll see where we are.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, no, you won't be evaluating each other or anything like that.
Yeah.
So.
Wanted to make sure I had that down right in my notes.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. All right. Any other questions on the group assignment? Is everybody planning on doing it? I see a lot of heads nodding there. I see a thumbs up. All right. Way to use those emojis, Sydney. Okay. Well, great. So what I'd like to use today's time for, of course, I have a lot of videos and material available on D2L for you. And like I said, I'm not going to go through those slides line by line and just go through everything because you know, you're all very intelligent people, and I have the utmost confidence that you are reading your assignments and doing your work. So with that, what I'd like to do with this time is just kind of go through and elaborate on some of these concepts that your book talks about and that you may be reading in the slides. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay. Can everybody, can you see the blank white screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So what we're going to delve into today is the biology, the biological perspective of the brain. Now, I talked last week about the difference between the brain and the mind. What's the difference between the brain and the mind?
I think we said the last time the brain is the organ of the body and the mind is what is happening inside of the brain that we can see. Right.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Cheflet, I think you're the one that talked about the differences, right? So that's exactly right. The brain is a physical structure and the mind is more of the mental process. So when we look at the brain is the actual wiring, okay? So if you think of like your television set, now or your computer, I think computer is probably the best example here, is you have two things that really make up your computer. You have the hardware and you have the software. Now the software isn't necessarily, it's not really the wiring, right? It's not, has nothing to do with the wiring that you're seeing things on your screen. Where you're getting the images on your screen, that's the process, right? But it takes all sorts of wiring and all sorts of hardware to make that happen. You have your hard drive, right? That's where you store your information. And you're going to hear me make a lot of analogies to the computer because we really design the computer with our understanding of how the brain works. You have your processor, which kind of triages what information goes where and how fast, right? You have your RAM, which is your short-term memory within your computer. So it stores chunks of information, uses it, processes it, and then either puts it up on the screen or interacts with that information or moves it back to long-term storage or on your hard drive, right? And then, of course, you have your screen and your, which is your output. It tells you what your computer's thinking. And that's kind of where we see the mental processing going on, is through the screen. And the screen would be synonymous maybe with our behaviors or our expressions or something like that, because that's how we show the world what our mental processes are, right? So the brain, put simply, is our structure. And I think I shared with you last week that at a very young age, like prenatal, our brain starts developing at an exponential rate. I mean, faster than any other time in our lives is during prenatal and infancy. And then it kind of slows down as we start using those building blocks to build secure neural pathways, which later show up in our personalities and the way we express our emotions and the way that we communicate, right? So at a very microscopic level, we have, and I talked about neurons. Neurons start building out and making connections into what we call the neuron cell, right? Actually, I think I missed another screen here somewhere. I apologize. Oh, lost an image. Sorry, I'm still grappling with this technology. All right, so how this is, again, at a basic level, your neuron cell. And it's made up of a couple parts here. You have your dendrites, right? You have your terminals, which receives, if you can imagine two of these in a row, you would have this connecting to these, right? And these are spread throughout the body, throughout the entire body. So these dendrites receive information that get processed in the nerve, the soma, or the nerve cell body. Now, what's interesting about the nerve cell is this is like a packet of information. It tells your neurons exactly what they're supposed to be doing, whether they're supposed to be inhibitory or they're designed to be excitatory. And I'll explain what that means later. So based on the information, the threshold that's met here, this nerve body will say, okay, we have something happening here. Now, if you can imagine, if you took a pin and like hovered it just over your finger, okay? Now your fingers are very sensitive, but if you don't touch your finger, you're not gonna really have any action potential. You're not gonna have anything happening whatsoever because there's nothing occurring. There's nothing telling your cell bodies that, hey, we need to activate and tell the brain something's going on, right? So when you touch your finger, that activates pain receptors and pressure receptors that start firing. Now, depending on how many of these and to what level are activated, the soma decides whether or not to fire. It's either fire or no fire, right? So if it fires, your potassium and sodium, which are your positive and negatives, activate and create a charge that carries all the way down the axon or the body. So the axon is more analogous to a wire. Okay, if you think of a wire, the electricity in your house, when you flip a switch, it activates energy and it goes to whatever source, either a wall outlet or a light source or whatever it is that you have. So that's essentially what's happening here, is you're having a firing through that wire. Now, if you notice this orange area here, this is myelin sheath. Many of your axons within your body are protected by what's called a myelin sheath. And what that does for you is it insulates, it protects you from having any kind of outside interference or any kind of chemical interference or electrical impulse interference. So for example, if you didn't have that insulation in your house, say you have two wires that are close together or overlapping in your house, and they don't have insulation on it, what happens? Any guesses? If you have two bare wires touching each other, what happens?
They light up. They like spark.
Okay, they short out, right? right? So the energy in one wire is touching the other wire, and it's creating some kind of interference. And that's what would happen if we didn't have the myelin sheath. So very important function here for some of this. And there are disorders with people that lack the myelin sheath or myelinization would have difficulty functioning in certain parts of their body if they don't have that protection, right? So anyway, your axon carries the electrical charge to these synapses here. And I'll talk about how these work later. But basically, it just branches out to wherever it needs to go, and it connects to another neuron cell right here, okay? So you're with me so far? All right, so don't get too far into the weeds as to the electrical charge. Just know that, and I think there's a good video out there that kind of shows how these gates and charges work through here. But just know that for today's purposes, that it just carries through that electrical charge to activate another neuron. And this happens thousands and thousands of times until it reaches your brain, okay? All right, so action potential. Now, I think this is worth explaining because we all consider our bodies to be very dynamic, and we think that we have certain abilities to be sensitive to certain things, and to a degree, you're right. That has nothing to do with the number or the voltage that goes through these neurons, if that makes sense, okay? So in other words, you can't have, like if you had a pin in your finger or somewhere on your body and you press it and you feel it, right? You pushing harder would do what? What would you feel if you pushed harder with that pin on a certain area of your body?
It would hurt more.
It would hurt more, right? That has nothing to do with the level of voltage going through these axons, through these neurons. Has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with more neurons being activated. So more, you might have pressure nerves, you might have pain receptors, you might have tissue damage, okay? There are all sorts of, and again, your fingers are very sensitive to these things, but the more that are activated, the more it tells your brain, hey, something's happening here, and we perceive that. We've learned to perceive that as a threat, as pain, right? So what happens is the more nerves that fire, the higher degree that we feel that thing, that event. So each at a microscopic level, each one of these neurons, it's all or nothing. So as I talked to you about the dendrites, so maybe our threshold is 30 dendrites need to be activated. And again, your soma, your nucleus is telling your cell this. So 30 dendrites is the requirement according, and this could be different for every neuron, okay? It might be 10 for some, it might be 100 for some, but for today's demonstration, we'll just say 30 dendrites. So you're pushing your pin into your finger, and maybe you only get, 23 dendrites activated, okay? 23 nerve receptors activated. Well, this one has 50, so maybe we should have gone with that. But anyway, as you can see, not really enough to fire. It's not really enough in there to say, hey, we've hit the 30 mark and we need to fire something, okay? Once we hit the 30, say we push a little harder and we get 31, now we've reached that threshold, which fires an electrical charge down your neuron, okay? And that activates, depending on the instructions of the next neuron, that activates that next one, and it just goes on and on and on in a chain reaction until it gets to our brain and we perceive that, okay? So I always like to, and maybe some of you will appreciate this, but if you look at the action potential, we look at it as a toilet flushing, all right? So it's kind of weird associating these two, but I think it's helpful to understand. When you flush a toilet, what happens? It fills up until it hits a threshold, and then it drops, it drains, okay? And that happens, I'm kind of getting into hydrodynamics here, right? So you have your water level here. Okay, that's your that's kind of where you're sitting. Your threshold, and this is your pipe, by the way, this this curve. Your threshold is right here. So when water fills in from the tank.
Excuse me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I don't think I can see your screen. I'm still on the neural impulse screen.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm trying to just draw it on top of that. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, I could do a blank screen here.
That's okay. I just thought it was another one and I thought I was lost.
Okay. I'm not a very good artist, so yeah, drawing toilets is not my specialty. So anyway, so what happens is the tank fills the water until the water level gets to this point, and then it evacuates down the pipe, and you get the flushing. That's exactly what's happening with action potential. Okay, it hits that threshold, and it's just an all or nothing. Okay, is everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So between these neurons, and this is going to play a big part when we get into therapies, especially drug therapies, and we're going to talk about neurotransmitters here in just a little bit as well. But within these neurons, so if you can imagine your dendrite, right? Okay, so your axon is here, and then between these, you have, or actually it could even be between, oops, sure you want to add new file. No, I don't. Anyway, any connection that you have, either in the dendrites or the terminals, whatever, they're going to have this little gap here. This is how they're all connected. And it kind of looks like a bone, doesn't it? Right? So when you get to these little branches at the end, you have neurotransmitters in what are called vesicles, just stored in there, waiting to do whatever it is that they do. All right. So when they get that impulse, that neuro impulse, that electrical charge, it pushes these vesicles out to the end of the terminal. Okay. And releases what are called neurotransmitters. Now, we have all sorts of neurotransmitters within our body. We're only going to be focused on a couple of them here. But if you can kind of get this image here, and again, this is the new receptor, which connects to, it's probably going to be one of these dendrites here to receive information. Okay, so these neurotransmitters go across this little gap called your synapse, your synaptic gap, and lays across these surfaces, these receptors, okay, which then creates a chemical charge and activates a new chain of event, right? So what sometimes happens is if these neurotransmitters that are released don't get to these receptors for whatever reason, and we'll talk about some of those reasons in here in just a little bit. It could be a chemical imbalance. It could be drugs, right? Some drugs either imitate these neurotransmitters, or they inhibit these neurotransmitters, or prevent them from coming back up and regenerating into, because this is what we call reuptake. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But reuptake is whatever neurotransmitters are left are recycled and put back into the neurotransmitter. Okay, so that's at a rough level. That's what a synapse does. That's what each one of your connections look like throughout your neural makeup. Okay, now we talked about neurotransmitters. Now your body has dozens of neurotransmitters. So we're really going to focus, for the purpose of this course, we're going to look at serotonin. Okay, serotonin is really involved in happiness. It's involved in mood. It's what keeps us kind of level and feeling like we're okay and alert. You have dopamine, which is what we call our pleasure chemical. Okay, dopamine is activated for many of reasons. In fact, we call it, we consider it one of our reward systems. Some people, I don't know if we have any nicotine users, either smokers or vapors, but nicotine activates dopamine. So it makes you, it's a stimulant. It makes you feel good. It rewards you just by its very presence in your body. So it activates dopamine, which fires extra or makes those receptors, you know, we talked about those receptors, fire more. So you feel happier. So what happens when you don't have that nicotine? Say you use nicotine for a long time, and then all of a sudden you stop. What happens to that dopamine level? Any guesses? You can feel free to chime in.
I guess you are not going to have the enough amount you need to be happy.
Right, right. So what happens here in the example of nicotine use is you have somebody that uses nicotine for a long time, or maybe even caffeine. Caffeine does the same thing. Your body gets used to not producing dopamine. It kind of cuts back because it's getting adequate enough from whatever chemical you're using. So when you stop using that or stop putting that chemical or that substance into your body doesn't know what to do with that. So it's not creating dopamine anymore, or not to the levels that it used to. And it takes a while for it to regenerate and say, okay, well, we're not getting dopamine anymore. I'll start making it. But it takes up, in some cases, up to 3 days for your dopamine levels to get back up to regular functioning order. So have any of you known anybody that's tried to quit smoking or tried to quit drinking coffee if they've done it for a long amount of time?
That's me.
That's you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens when you don't have that after a while, if you're a long
Oh, well, you will have headaches and feel like you can't even eat sometime because like, it don't makes you feel you, because something missing to be complete, something missing in overall.
Now, Pierre, I'm assuming you're talking about caffeine, right?
Caffeine and nicotine, the both.
Okay.
Yeah. Either the caffeine, if you used to take the caffeine every morning, and the morning you will not get any coffee in your body, feels like you're still sleeping.
Yeah, yeah. So what happens with caffeine? It's really cool. So you have actually two things that are going on with caffeine. So if you were to stop caffeine, say you have 2 or 3 cups every day, guilty as charged. If you have 2 or 3 cups every day, and then all of a sudden, maybe after 3, 4, 5 months, you decide I'm not going to have coffee anymore. First of all, you don't have that stimulation in your body. So it actually caffeine targets your serotonin and your dopamine. So you might feel depressed. You might feel a little bit more cranky. You're not going to feel you're not going to have that dopamine, so you're not going to have that reward anymore. So serotonin and dopamine are really going to take a while to get back up to levels. Biologically, caffeine constricts the blood vessels in our head, in our brains, and it kind of makes it a little bit more narrow for blood to get through, but it also thins your blood because so it doesn't really need to have full size vessels open in your brain. So what happens when you stop is your blood thickens, and yet your brain, the vessels in your brain are still constricted. So that's where the headaches come from. So just a little bit of gee whiz information for you there. So kind of just going to brush over these things because these were really in your reading here. But glutamate. So glutamate is important for learning and memory, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into learning disorders and stuff.
Excuse me?
Yes, go ahead.
If you show another slide, we're not able to see it.
Okay. Are you seeing serotonin right now?
Not all.
Is anybody else, is anybody seeing what I'm showing up on?
No, my screen is still stuck on the neural impulse.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, the neural, I see the neural impulse.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you didn't see the, huh.
No, I didn't get to see your toilet drawing either.
Okay, you're probably better for that. I apologize. I thought, let me try this again. Okay, are you seeing it now?
Yes.
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 Okay, okay. If any of you have the slides, this kind of goes along with some of the slides. I just picked a couple of these just to talk about. So it's not all of them, but if any of you want to put that up on another screen or something and follow along, you're more than welcome to. So, all right. So anyway, as you can see, you have norepinephrine, which is also involved in arousal and mood. Endorphins help with pain relief. And also when we talk about, so a good example here, endorphins play a big part in our, we'll get into fight or flight, the concept of fight or flight, but endorphins play a big part within that. It releases adrenaline, which gives us kind of this superhuman strength, right? It gives us this boost where our mind kind of slows down. We can see everything. Our pupils dilate. Has anybody been, maybe you can relate to this, like out and about, just doing some kind of activity, and then all of a sudden you're frightened, and then you're either you're trying to run away, but in any case you get injured. Okay, you get to the point where you're injured, either broken a bone or cut your arm or something, and it takes a while for you to actually feel that pain. Has anybody experienced that before? I'm seeing a couple heads shake. That happens for a reason, because your adrenaline is kicked in, your endorphins are kicked in, and this is it's like a really potent painkiller, to the point where you can almost feel no pain whatsoever until your body normalizes, and then it hurts, doesn't it? It hurts really bad. So that's endorphins that are responsible for that. Acetylcholine is also implicated in attention and memory and muscle control, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. All right, so I just moved my slides. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so again, this is just depicting what I had on the other side about the vesicles, which contain the neurotransmitters. And when you have that charge that comes down your axon, it releases those vesicles across the synaptic gap, okay? And is either accepted or rejected by these receptor sites, okay? Now, what this slide shows, I kind of like this slide here, because this is showing the effects of cocaine. Now, cocaine is what? Anybody want to take a guess? What kind of drug is it? Is it a stimulant or depressant?
A stimulant.
Okay, that's right. So kind of like coffee or nicotine, right? So what happens with cocaine is it activates when you ingest it or it gets into your bloodstream, it fills the synaptic gap. It takes over here, and it excites. It makes these receptor sites, sometimes these receptors don't exactly take the neurotransmitters, but in this case, cocaine imitates the dopamine. So it sets the stage for you to feel even happier than what you normally do. And when we feel happy, we are more attentive, right? So we might be a little bit more attuned to what's going on around us, or hypervigilant or something like that. Or we might have energy that we don't normally have because we are being rewarded, okay? So that's exactly what happens here with cocaine. And when we get into drug addiction, this will make a little bit more sense. I just kind of wanted to give you an example of how certain chemicals can influence the function of these synaptic gaps. Okay. All right. Now I move my slide. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. It says the nervous system. All right. So the nervous system, it's really, when we think of the brain functioning, the brain in general, we call that the nervous system. All right. Your nervous system is broken into two parts. You got the central nervous system, which we consider the brain and the spinal cord. These are the physical pathways that lead from your little toe in your left foot all the way up to the base of your spine and into your brain. Okay. And of course, the brain is the physical structure that interprets, stores, and sends all the information, and then activates using muscles, glands, and organs. Okay. On the other side of the nervous system, you have the peripheral, or the PNS, the peripheral nervous system. Okay. This is more functional than it is physical structure. Now, what do I mean by that? So functional, I mean your somatic nervous system uses information that your brain receives or initiates to activate your motor system, or it communicates with your sensories. Like, for example, we talked about a pin that you push into your finger. Now, who can tell me what happens when you touch something hot?
It burns.
It burns. What do you do? What is your
Don't
reaction?
touch it again. You move your finger.
Try to take your finger away.
Okay. Nobody try this right now, by the way. But if you were to touch something hot or something sharp, and this is kind of it's called a feedback loop, and it's really hardwired into us, but we have certain reactions that happen automatically. Many of you maybe have gone to the doctor where they tap right below your knee, and what happens?
It makes your leg jump.
Right. Because those neurons in there, those nerve endings are designed to feed right back into your somatic nervous system, which helps to protect you. This is from when we look at from an evolutionary standpoint, these systems are built to protect us. So if we touch something hot, it sends a signal to our brain, and almost immediately, without us thinking about it, causes us to pull away. Okay, because that's the survival mode kicking in us. So anyway, we call those our efferent, which is our motor ability, and our afferent, which is our pain receptors. And sometimes they are very closely connected for that very reason. Other times, maybe not so much. Like if we see something, for example, that doesn't happen automatically. Maybe if some of us are easily excited about something going on in the environment, say we're driving at night and we see two eyes appear right in front of us, what might we do?
Slam on the brakes.
Right, because we know that eyes might be something dangerous in the road. It might be a threat that we need to avoid. It's something that could cause us harm. So now and that goes into visual processing, which we'll talk about, I think in the next session, next week. But yeah, sometimes it happens automatically. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thought process. And if it's something unfamiliar, it may take even longer. But again, when we get into perception and processing, that'll make a little bit more sense. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do, let's see what time. What I'd like to do is cover, let's talk about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous, or the ANS, autonomic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system is a really cool design. And I talked about these automatic things that happen. Autonomic nervous system is it's kind of the kingpin for your entire reactionary system, okay? And many of you are probably going to be able to relate to this. When we encounter a fear, if you can imagine walking in the woods, do any of you hike or go out on trails or go out in nature or anywhere? Okay, so imagine that you're out on a trail and you encounter a bear. What happens? What happens in your mind? What happens in your body?
Right away, your brain automatically knows that a bear is an animal that's wild and can easily attack. So when you think about it, you immediately like do what you can do to avoid that. And as we know, and I know this, it's never smart to run from a bear because they run. So like, I know it's best to like back away calmly and slowly.
Yeah. No, I read all those pamphlets, and it depends on where you go. I've been all over the world, and it depends on what, and I don't know who decides, who's the foremost expert on what to do with bears. But some pamphlets, if you go to like national parks or state parks, some pamphlets tell you not to run. I hear that as well. Some of them tell you to back away, and I've actually seen one. I think I had a copy of it because I thought it was interesting. It says you fight for your life. So,
yeah. Well, I actually heard one thing. Another said, now one person didn't say run or back away slowly. One person said this also helps, making a very loud noise or playing dead.
I heard playing dead too, and I got to tell you, I think the Bears wrote that pamphlet.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they want you to play dead because I didn't understand that playing dead one either.
But I did hear it also helps like if you like stomp or scream or make a loud loud noise, or like this, or like one time one of my neighbors was walking her dogs out at night and two coyotes came up. And as soon as the coyotes see the dogs think this, like they thought we have dinner. And her dogs were big, and they were not attack dogs, they weren't fight dogs, but the dogs also knew they had to try to defend themselves. So them and the coyotes started going back like this, like well, luckily a neighbor had a light on and was looking out the window and saw what was, and then came out banging with pots and pans, and then that scared the coyotes away.
Okay. So that's a great example. So take the perspective of the coyote. All right, and that's kind of how our mind works too. Is when we do things that make sense and are normal and routine. And for coyotes, that's very normal for them, is to get into attack formation to some larger animal, because larger animals may not scare them off if they're in a pack or something. Now, when they're alone, that might be different. But anyway, they have it wired into their brain that this is routine for them. So what happens when you start banging pans? Is that routine? That's frightening, right? It gets them excited, and their fight or flight kicks in. So that's kind of what happens with bears. I mean, if you look at it from both perspectives, bears have that same reaction. Were you trying to say something, Destiny?
No, my computer froze, so I'm having to switch from my computer to my phone.
Okay, I thought I heard your voice come through. Okay, no big deal. So anyway, from the bear's perspective, they have that same reaction. So if they're out ruffling through trash or whatever is happening, and they're enjoying their day, just getting a meal, and then all of a sudden they see a human, right? It's not every day they encounter humans, so they don't know anything about humans. Maybe they've had an unpleasant experience with humans, but they get that same fight or flight, and they'll do one of two things. 9 times out of 10, they're going to run away. But unless they got cubs and you have mama, person, and cubs, chances are that mom is going to rely on her instincts to harm whatever is between her and her cubs. So anyway, they have that same reaction. So if you do something that is abnormal for them and they're not used to it, that triggers a fight or flight with them, and chances are they're going to run away because they're in survival.
So, would you say that's also kind of like the same way that skunks play like in a role, because their routine is to keep like normal and quiet, and of course like when they feel endangered, threatened, or scared, they'll spray an odor on that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thing.
Yep. That's another good example. And we have very similar reactions to that. If we get very scared, for some people, that fear response could evacuate their bowels or evacuate their urine or something. So you've heard of that, right? People get so scared that they wet themselves. That's a very similar reaction to that. But that's all because of the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. Okay. So looking back, so can you all see the fight or flight slide here? Actually, before we get into this, what I'd like to do is break everybody up into groups, okay? And what I want you to do is maybe groups of 3. Let's see, how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think groups of 3 would be good. So I'll break you off into groups. I did figure out how to use my breakout room, so there won't be any problems today. But break off into your groups. And if you just want to have one spokesperson to talk about this topic, that's great. If you all want to chime in somehow, that's fine too. But come up with a situation where you've encountered something that's frightful, all right? And it could be a personal story, it could be a hypothetical story, whatever it is. And based on that fear response, what happened within the body? Now think about breathing, think about heart rate, think about, whatever it is. What are the physiological responses that we have to fear? All right, so ponder that, give that some thought. Any questions before we get into this? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll break you off into groups of 3. And go ahead, discuss that. I'll give you about 5 minutes and then we'll meet back here on the main screen. How's that sound? All right. Oh, wait. Let me try it again. All right, so go ahead and accept those and go into your rooms.
No, it just took me back to the other room.
Oh, so he said we're about to rejoin the class in a minute.
Okay.
So I think we have a bunch of pretty good examples.
I think so. Come back up here. Come back up here. Come back up here. Utley, you don't get any coffee.
right. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a couple more groups coming in to join us. All right. So what did we come up with? What were some, let me share my screen with you once again. So what did we come up with? Who had some really good examples? Brave.
Are we going by groups or just?
Oh, yeah, just anybody chime in.
All right. Well, I was in a group with Destiny and Morgan, and we were talking about like the scariest things that happened to us, or like injuries. And I was telling them about a time where I was working in a kitchen and I was sharpening up a blade. I was sharpening a knife, and it slipped out of my hand because I hit the top part of the sharpener, and it bounced back on me, and it hit me right on my finger. And I felt like it went to the bone, but it didn't. But it was still a pretty big gash. But I was like completely calm. Like I was in a total shock mentality, and I didn't even realize how bad it was, even though the blood was flowing out like water. I was just completely calm and like saying it didn't hurt, because it didn't hurt at all. It was like perfect. Okay. But as soon as I got to the doctor, they're like, yeah, no, that could have been infected. We need to put stitches on it. Luckily, you're not going to lose the finger.
Okay.
But yeah, that was like the craziest thing that ever happened to me.
Okay, so what you're describing is, so there are a couple things going on here.
Yeah.
Your sympathetic nervous system did activate, and what it did is it released endorphins into your body to kind of numb the pain, because you started panicking, right?
Right.
And we can really relate to this, because many of us, this has happened where we've sustained some kind of injury, and we're more looking at safety and survival than we are of cradling that wound or that injury or whatever that is at the time. So we just want to make sure that we are out of danger. And so those are endorphins and adrenaline that kicks in to make sure that you can get to safety first. And then once you're at safety, then your parasympathetic kicks in, which I'll talk about in a minute, and makes you kind of normal again. But with that, you start to feel the pain, which you probably experience, right?
Yeah, I was definitely in pain after I got to the doctor. It was definitely hurting then.
So in your case, adrenaline, right? Endorphins kicked in. And also attentiveness, alertness, right? Became hypervigilant. So you started, things started slowing down because you were in fear that something major was happening to your body. So your attentiveness and your alertness goes up, right? Good example. All right. How about anybody else? Anybody else have something that may have happened, or they have a hypothetical situation of a fear response?
Well, I think I was in a group with, I think her name was Hiram, and she had said something about the field of screams whenever she goes like to the field of screams and they're trying to scare her. Like her reaction is to scream. And I said, when I get really scared, my like hands get really sweaty and I get shaky and I pant.
Okay. Like hyperventilate?
Yeah, like breathe a little bit more.
Yeah, like to go along with what she said, like, and I share this with my group too, like sometimes like when I'm scared, like I'll start to like breathe really heavy and then like hands get sweaty, and then also like I can literally like hear my heart pounding in my chest, like boom, 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 boom.
All right. So far we have endorphins, we have attentiveness or alertness. We have breathing. So what do you think? Does breathing go up or does it go down when we're frightened?
Probably up.
You think?
I will say maybe it depends on the person.
Because your brain is trying to process everything else, so the oxygen is not receiving.
Exactly. So believe it or not, breathing goes down when we're excited. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, because if you look at attentiveness and alertness, that goes up, doesn't it? So what we're doing is we're trying to create as little sound as possible so we can hear the threat around us. It goes along with our alertness and our attentiveness. So have any of you done any like public speaking, gotten up in front of people and felt really, really nervous and almost passed out? Anybody ever pass out doing a public speech? I did. 11th grade, I'm not kidding you. I was really good at getting away from doing book reports. And I had a teacher that really held me to the fire and made me get away with it. I mean, I pulled out all the stops. I tried to skip school. I tried to play sick. I did not want to do this book report whatsoever, but she had me do this book report. When I got up there, I started talking. I did my introduction, and it wasn't a bad, I had everything written out and I was very well prepared. But I started looking out in the audience, and there were only maybe 20 kids in my class, but my field of vision just went, and before I knew it, I was waking up to the teacher fanning me off on the floor. So what had happened there? I stopped breathing. And I do that, and it's a classic fear response, is to stop breathing, because you are super hyper vigilant of the world around you, trying to assess what threat there is. And when breathing goes down, oxygen goes down. And of course, you're not getting blood flow and oxygen to your brain, and all sorts of weird things happen, right? So yeah, despite what people think. Now, I know that you had mentioned, I'm sorry, I did forget your name. You were talking about panting, right? What was your name?
Me, Lauren?
Lauren, yes. Yeah, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. So what Lauren was describing was panting, was hyperventilating. So not having that oxygen kind of freaks out our lungs, and we need that oxygen because our heart is, as Mitch had described, is pounding super fast, right? So yeah. So in order to get that jump started, we start hyperventilating or panting. So very cool. Sweating. What happens with sweating is we get cold and clammy because during moments of fear, our body reroutes all the blood flow to important organs in our body. So our heart, our liver, our spleen, and it just wants to make sure that everything is flowing optimally and working normally in case of injury, or in case we need to get away from whatever threat that is. So it diverts all the blood flow from our capillaries, like from our skin or from our lips or from our earlobes, things that it's not really necessary, it's not very vital, to more vital organs like our brains, our hearts, our lungs, that sort of thing. So that's why we get that cold and clammy sensation. And of course, our heart rate starts pounding because it's preparing to do something. It's preparing to fight off that threat or run away from that threat. Okay. So we have all heard of fight or flight, haven't we? Hopefully. So fight or flight, again, ward off that foe, the enemy, or bring it back and try and run away from that enemy. But what we experience, and we'll talk a lot about this when we get into fear responses and anxiety and depression, is a third option. That third option is freeze. Okay. And maybe some of you can relate to that. When we don't have an actual threat in front of us, what happens? If we can't fight something, if we can't see something or hear something or know that it's there, can we really fight it off? Can we really run away from it? Imagine having, say right now, I told you we're going to have a surprise midterm test. I know it's only week 2, midterm test right now. How would that make everybody feel?
I would automatically start hitting the panic button.
Right.
I will admit, exactly. That was one thing in school I hated. I hated pop quizzes.
So do I. And luckily I don't have them. Yeah. So you're all safe. But imagine, I mean, putting you in that situation, your panic would start to go up, right? And that's anxiety because you can't fight that. That's nothing you can really fight. You just have to get through that. And that affects our sleep, that affects our diet. Our bodies were not intended to endure stress for a long time. And I think that's chapter 7 that we're going to talk about: stress, emotion, and motivation. So anyway, a lot of really cool things surrounded with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So just to wrap this up, now it seems like we all have a pretty good concept of what our fear responses are, right? So the other side of the coin is when that threat is removed, our parasympathetic system kicks in, and that releases acetylcholine. It releases, it starts holding back the endorphins, not firing so much, because you remember what I said at the beginning. We as humans are two things, right? What are those two things? Anybody remember?
Prideful and lazy.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Of course, in the most endearing terms, we're lazy and prideful, right? Because I'm just trying to come up with one words. But we like routine. We like things to be calm and easy for us, because when they're heightened, that plays a significant stress on our bodies and our minds. So getting back to normal is built into us, and that's what your parasympathetic does. It releases.
And I can relate to that because, like, I kind of felt like that back in March, like when we were in a position like where we were forced to be like this.
Yeah.
Nobody really knew what was going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So that fear was there. And then once we got into a couple weeks into the semester, things started settling down because we got into routines, right? And I'll talk about a little bit later, we can trick our bodies. We don't have a lot of control over where the blood flows in our body. We don't have a lot of control over our temperature or our pupils, right? We can't dilate our pupils at will. There are a lot of things we can't do. However, what we can do is be aware that these are normal responses, and we can trick our bodies in some ways to thinking that maybe things aren't so bad, and we can calm down a little bit. And the two ways, and I'll share this a little bit more in depth with you later, I think when we get into stress reduction techniques, is pay attention to our muscle tension. Any ideas why our neck gets tense? Does anybody like get their shoulders pinned up when they get excited or get fearful or get angry or something?
Well, yeah, it's like kind of like when you go on a ride and like you get surprised, like.
Yes. There's a biological reason for that. That's to protect our head. That's to protect our neck, so that we don't get decapitated from a threat. if you can imagine that, that's biologically programmed into us. When we get fearful, we protect our neck. And so one of the other ways that you can relax is to notice, where you're carrying your shoulders, and being able to release the tension in your neck, and then start breathing. And you can do that through breathing exercises, which I'm going to give you all a sample of here as we get later into the semester. Okay. So anyway, that's basically all I have today. We're going to go into more about areas of the brain and the brain function when we meet next time. How did y'all like this? Was this pretty informative? Do we have any questions about the topic right now? And then I'll kind of hang back a little bit if anybody has specific topics about assignments or anything.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if I want to learn more in the book, which part I should read?
About what?
About the topic we just covered today.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
Yep. And we're kind of going sequentially here. So week 1 was chapter 1, week 2 is chapter 2, week 3, so on and so forth. I think I did take a little bit of a break when we get to the midterm, which I think is week 7, at which point we won't be doing any chapters that week. We'll just be reviewing for the midterm. And then week 8, I think we go to chapter 7. But if you follow along that last page in your syllabus, it's going to let you know exactly what's due when and what topics we're going to be covering. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
I had a question. Where are we supposed to submit that paper for the group work in?
Okay. If you go under week 2, you'll see, I have it broken out into overview, resources, discussion, and assessments. Anything that you need to turn in will be either in discussion, which is just a link to Packback, and then the other one will be assessment. So anything you really need to turn in is going to be under assessments, under content, week 2 assessments, okay? And that's going to be throughout the semester. But if you just click on that assignment, it'll give you an option to upload to the Dropbox. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I thank all of you for your attention. I'll hang back here a few minutes. If any of you have any personal issues, I'm going to stop recording right now. Again, I will see you on Wednesday, and we'll talk more about the structures of the brain. All right?
Okay.
Yep. Goodbye.
Thank you.